do not be intimidated. Speak up as much as you could. I know you will be accused of self-hating Jews and that, but try what you can. Urge your politicians that they should do what they can to stop this murder in Gaza, to stop the oppression of the Palestinians, and it will be a gift for the Jewish people also.
Hi, guys. If you're an American, this is one of the most important interviews that you'll see online. Why? Because it destroys the lie that supporting Israel is a sacred duty and exposes Zionism for what it really is, an anti-Jewish, nationalist, and political movement that's not only costing us billions, but threatens our sovereignty and risks our future. We were promised America first. Remember that? But we were deceived. So it's now up to us to cut ties with Zionism and deliver on that promise. Israel's influence over the U.S. is total. This isn't news. It's been this way for decades. But we're at a tipping point, and we can't afford to keep pretending that there's nothing at stake. Save this video and share it. This matters because we have to spot the lies, face hard truths, and break with old narratives if we're going to regain control of our nation. On my birthday, November 13th, I had the pleasure of interviewing Rabbi Weiss, the spokesman for Neturei Karta, a Jewish anti-Zionist organization that was founded in Jerusalem in 1938. And I was blown away by what I learned. You will be too. In just 1 hour, Rabbi Weiss taught me the history of Zionism, why it's in direct conflict with Judaism, and the threat that it poses to the world today. You can research Rabbi Weiss and his work online, but one thing that the internet won't tell you is what a kind and gracious person he is. It was truly an honor to meet him. I hope you guys enjoy the discussion and that it frees you from any conflict that you might have between what your leaders are telling you and what your conscience does. The interview was shot at Theorist Studios here in Midtown Manhattan. They're not sponsoring this video in any way, but I do recommend working with them if you're looking for a beautiful professional space for your own podcast. Asher and DJ are the best. I've left their contact information below. Tell them Nadia sent you. Let's get into it. Rabbi, first of all, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here today on my birthday. I'm very grateful for this. This is a great birthday present for me, and to speak with us today. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's for us, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to somehow make the world aware of a terrible calamity, a terrible injustice, and a terrible misunderstanding of a terrible quagmire. Actually, today it's a genocide that we're witnessing in Palestine that people think is a religious issue, a religious conflict, and therefore it's a catastrophe. So it's really critical that we have the opportunity to correct this. So thank you for giving us the opportunity.
It's a pleasure. So you're the spokesman for Neturei Karta. Am I saying that right?
Neturei Karta.
Neturei
It's
Karta.
an Aramaic word, yeah, and I'm one of the spokespeople for Neturei Karta. Yes.
Well, you are the one that's most known, at least to most of us on social media. You have a long and very impressive history of peaceful activism, instructive activism. It's greatly appreciated. So what caused you to dedicate your life's work to this mission?
So first, with the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty that He should bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message and so sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. Amen. I was born, with God's help, I was born to a very religious parents, a very religious family, and the leaders of our communities of the religious were very great rabbis. One was actually the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, of Palestine. His name was Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum of blessed memory, and he constantly, maybe in all of his speeches or almost all of his speeches, he spoke about this calamity of Zionism, this ersatz Judaism called Zionism, and the state of Israel, and how it's required upon the Jewish people to clarify and to correct to the world that Judaism does not accept this occupation, this existence of the state of Israel, because it goes to the core of what Judaism is. Judaism is to be subservient to God, to obey the covenant that we made with God, the Torah, and part of it is not to kill and not to steal, and to recognize that the Almighty rules the world, and on and on. And while Zionism is a ersatz Judaism, it's a new form, a new creation that is using the facade of Judaism and claiming it has the right to occupy and to do things that are just colossal crimes, and they're doing it in the name of the religion. So the reason of our life is to sanctify the Almighty's name. That's what we believe we're here for. And this goes to the core of that. This is desecrating God's name and their actions, what the Zionist state is doing and what they are. So therefore, he said it's obligatory upon us to go, at the cost of his lives, he would say, of our lives, that we should go out to the streets and decry and speak up and explain to the people that Zionism and the state of Israel does not represent Judaism. So it's one of the core issues of Judaism, because, as I say, we have to sanctify God's name, and this is being committed, the occupation is being committed in the name of Judaism, in the name of God, in the name of our name of Jewish people around the world. So it's critical for us to speak up, and I'm part of this community. I grew up in this very religious Jewish community, so that's what brought me to spend so much time.
Here in New York? Did you grow up in New York?
I was born and bred in New York, in Brooklyn, and I married, with God's help, a woman from Brooklyn, Williamsburg. Williamsburg is where this Rabbi Teitelbaum, as I say, was the chief rabbi of Palestine, of Jerusalem. When I say that, people, I'll have to really explain it a little bit more at length, because people know the chief rabbis, and when we speak about that in the rabbinate, they think of the Israeli rabbinate and their chief rabbis. And yet I don't mean that at all, because we look at their rabbinate, the Israeli rabbinate, and their chief rabbis as a joke, a farce. We have no respect for it. We have no recognition of it as a rabbinate or as a chief rabbis. It's I'll go back in Judaism like 100 years prior to that, like 300 years ago, 250, 300 years ago. Judaism was attacked by a movement called Reform Judaism. And
I never heard of that. Could you explain?
Oh yes, certainly. Well, in the United States, all around the United States and other lands, there's they say there's branches of Judaism. There's Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. Basically, Reform is maybe the largest segment of Jews in America are Reform. In other words, they're not practicing the Torah. They're not upholding the laws of the Torah, the basics, Sabbath, the Ten Commandments, that we believe a Jew, we are required that we believe that God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh he rested. So therefore, it says in the commandments that when God gave us the Torah, the tablets, it stated that we should keep the Sabbath. That means that we should, without working 6 days, but the seventh day to rest, to show respect that the Almighty created the world in 6 days. So that's one of the basics, the core of Judaism. And a movement started like 300 years ago called Reform, that they're going to reform, change the Judaism. This started in Austria and in Germany, Austria, this movement. And their whole concept was that a Jew is not bound by the commandments of the Torah. So it's one of the largest movements in the United States. They have their own temples. We have totally distinct from Orthodox Jewry. So I'll explain that a little more with God's help. Again, it was a time period. Somebody called Moses Mendelssohn, we say his name should be eradicated, came along with a group of his colleagues, and as I say, they introduced the concept that we're not bound with the Torah. As a Jew, what do we believe Judaism is? What we know, Judaism is a religion of over 3,000 years. It's that the Jewish people was I don't want to interrupt myself, but let's start again. That's the world we believe was created by God, and He created Adam and Eve, and then Adam and Eve had Noah 10 generations later. Then Noah had Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that's the Jewish lineage. And from after Jacob there was the 12 tribes,
Right, correct.
and then we were sent down to Egypt. We were in Egypt and enslaved for 210 years. It was supposed to be 400 years. God was shortened to 210 years. The Almighty made miracles. He sent the 10 plagues to the Pharaoh who was enslaving the Jews. This was miraculous happenings. They were taken out from, God took the Jewish people out of Egypt. Into Sinai desert. First they crossed the Red Sea, and God made a miracle. He split the Red Sea. And
Right, these
all
are the
Jews,
stories that
the
most,
basics, right, that's the
Christians,
basics,
Catholics, I
right.
mean, we know these stories that
Right. So
the
that-
Reformists came along
Yeah.
and said,
Well, yeah, so let's get there. So we made it, and then we went to Mount Sinai after we crossed the Red Sea, and the Jewish people, all over 1 million people, because there's 600,000 males, it says in the Torah, from the age of 20 to 60, besides the women and children and older people. So it must be over 1 million people stood there and saw how God, that Moses went up on the Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. He came down with the tablets, and we made a covenant with God where all the Jews were witness to all these miraculous happening, and we made a covenant that we will be subservient to God, that we'll make this covenant with God to uphold the Torah.
right,
And we declared loyalty to God, as I say, subservient to Him and accepting everything that He wants of us, the laws of the Torah, 613 commandments of the Torah, and that we will never stray from it, never add to it or subtract from it. So that is the basic Jewish belief. From that day till today, it's a little over 3,000 years, and we do not stray. We adapt our lives to if the times change and there's different issues. I always give an example like electric. We're not allowed to make a fire on the Sabbath because to remember, like, we have to rest on the seventh day. So now when the advent of electricity came about, so the rabbis had a discussion around the world, how do we classify electric? And they decided this is considered like fire, so we're not allowed to use that on the Sabbath. So we won't go in a car because it's combustible, and then you can't open electric lights on Sabbath. So what we do is, we don't sit in the dark. We open the lights before the Sabbath. We're not allowed to cook on the Sabbath. We put the pots on the gas before the Sabbath.
Right, you adjust.
Flame, and so
Right.
we adjust our lives to conform. We don't conform the Torah to our lives, God's commandments. So we conform ourselves to God's command. We remain loyal to the Torah. We steadfast, and we teach our children, and we teach our children that we're ready. Our whole purpose in life is to sanctify God's name. That's the purpose of life. The ultimate pinnacle of that sanctifying God's name is when God will reveal His glory throughout the world, where all humanity will recognize one God. That doesn't mean everybody will become Jewish. No, it means that everybody will recognize that there's a ruler to the world, there's God, and all the nations will gather together and serve God in harmony. That's what we yearn and pray for that coming. But going back to Mount Sinai, we made this covenant with God over 3,000 years ago, and God required of us to go into the Holy Land. And we went to the Holy Land, and God required of us to build a temple. King Solomon later in time built a temple, but the whole time, as it says in the Torah many times, the Almighty said that we have to serve Him all throughout our lives, wherever we are, and any part of the earth. But in the Holy Land, it has a certain degree of like a spirituality of holiness, a higher spirituality, that therefore we have to be more careful in our daily life how to act. And if we're not up to par of this holiness, then we will be driven from the land. And we had many prophets. We had Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and all the prophets kept on warning the Jewish people, as it's written in the books, and the books are translated in English and any language. And they warned the Jews the whole time that be careful, because if you're not up to that level, and you will be driven from the land. We believe that eventually that happened with the destruction of the temples. There was one temple, King Solomon's temple, and it was destroyed. 70 years later, they built another temple. It was also destroyed, and the Jews were driven into exile. First, it was into Babylon. They were driven by first the Romans, then the Greeks, and the Jews were dispersed throughout the world. And King Solomon, who built the temple, was also a prophet. He made a book called Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, and in that he wrote, like, the Jewish people are warned by God. They're under 3 oaths. When you're going to be driven into exile, if you will be driven, and when, because it was a prophecy, then you are to uphold these oaths. What are the oaths? That do not attempt to return en masse in large numbers. Because it's a decree of God. You're being dispersed amongst the nations, and is a decree of God. So don't attempt to fight the hand of God. Don't try to mass yourselves together and return in mass to the way. Secondly, don't rebel against any nation. You're dispersed amongst the nations. You have to be loyal citizens in every country we reside. Pray for its well-being, even if we're not treated fairly. Let's say they're taxed more excessively, more than other people of the country. We still have to be loyal citizens to that country. The third issue is that we should never make any attempt to end exile. But what we do is we pray to God, and we hope that God one day will feel that we have reached the level of holiness that's required, and God, with his compassion, will bring an end to this long exile that is, and he will then reveal his glory throughout the world. There'll be a metaphysical change in the world.
It's really interesting to me, because I will tell you, like, a lot of American Christian Zionists, right? So they use Genesis. I have it down here somewhere. Their whole argument is based on Genesis 12:3, right? And the American Christian Zionist perspective is no. This covenant has been ongoing, and it is unconditional. I have heard that so many times, and I said, well, where do you find that? I know it's the Schofield interpretation, which is a whole other issue, but there's no so. I mean, I'm really. This is why I'm so. Please, because
it is a big, beautiful wall across from the United Nations. It's a concave wall. It's like that,
right?
And that's what it says, that they shall beat their swords into plowshares and the spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. In Isaiah, it's etched into the wall. It's a very big wall across from you. So basically, this is many Jewish people and other people believe in the prophecy of Isaiah, and that's this is what we yearn for, that the time will come that there will be, and we don't see that nowadays, unfortunately, but we do know that it will come, that God will make a miraculous change, a metaphysical change in the world, where all humanity, I say, will stop being atheists. They'll believe in God. Not they will become Jewish, but everybody will recognize God. Then it says, we say in our verses, the nations shall join together. They'll make one bond and will come together to serve God. That was, so the 101 of Judaism.
So when did that change?
So
what happened? Like, that's a really big difference than what
2 more minutes on that. I'll explain this.
Yeah,
so
of course.
This is the 101 of Judaism. We were taken out of Egypt. God commanded us to go into the Holy Land, but he stipulated that we have to be on a high level of holiness. If not, we'll be driven into exile. Once we're driven into exile, we're under 3 oaths: not to return en masse, not to reestablish
this is in Isaiah.
a nationhood. No, this is in Song of Songs from King Solomon, that we're not to reestablish any nationhood because we're in exile, decreed by God. God is the ruler of the world. He sees everybody's suffering. He sees every minute issue of the world is ruled by God and run by God. And so God is with us in exile. He's everything that happens to every human being in the world is controlled by God. So we're in exile now, and so as an exile, we're not to leave exile because it's a decree of God. It will, though, there will come a time that it will end. So in all the Jewish prayers and all our prayers, we constantly speaking about how we yearn to be close to God, to the time when the Almighty, with his compassion, will take us back, where he will build a temple without any human interference. The Almighty will build a 3rd temple, we call it. So all the nations will come up and serve him. Because of this, the Jewish belief, which is published and open for the whole world to see. It's been printed in Arabic, all the books of Judaism, the Bible, and the prophecies. That's why the Muslim nations, for instance, throughout history, never had a problem with the Jewish communities because they knew we're not a threat to them. We never aspire for nationhood, to take over any land or anything. as individuals, by the way, according to these oaths, God permits us to live in the Holy Land. As a nation, we were driven from the land. But as individuals, so throughout history, we lived there. When it was under Christian rule, we were there. Then afterwards, they drove us out, and then there was the Inquisition, the Crusades drove us out. But then the Ottoman Empire took over, and they took the Jews back in. So they were Muslims, they were full of scholarism, but they had no problems. And Jews and Muslims lived together. That's how we.
Yeah, I've seen throughout
totally different religion because
100%. I've seen when I was doing my research, for many of the videos that I do, and I've never there was no problem. There was no problem, and a lot of people are not aware.
Of that. But that's basically Judaism. That the difference of religion has absolutely nothing to do with the conflict that we're witnessing, the 77-year of occupation. That's basic Judaism. Reform Judaism came along around 300 years ago, and they started saying, they were impatient. They saw Satan, like we say, drove them because they should have just dropped the religion and finished. They don't like it. Stop.
Right.
Not that we condone not practicing it.
No, but that's a choice, right?
What they did was they insisted on creating a new style of Judaism called Reform. So they said, God didn't give Moses the Torah. Moses created a book, and therefore you can pick and choose what's convenient. So they don't keep kosher, which is required in the Torah. You're not allowed to kosher certain types of food. You're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to eat pig. This, that. There are many different things. They don't keep the Sabbath. That's the basics of Judaism. But they don't keep any of that. And the majority of Jews, unfortunately, fell prey to this movement because it was very, very appealing. It was very because it made you that you're not required to pray. You're not required to do everything.
Then what's the point?
What's the point? So in order to make this look legitimate, they created a rabbinate. They ordained their ministers, however, and so they made it look like it's a legitimate type of Judaism, and they called themselves a branch of Judaism. What evolved from this was that for a long time, it spread like wildfire throughout Europe. People, mostly from, people who weren't so knowledgeable in their religion started joining this movement because they were very popular because they felt that the people are starting to look up to them instead of looking at that Jew who dresses with a beard and is so different from society. They wanted to assimilate, blend into society. This was what Reform was about, blending into society. This movement went on for 20, 40, 50, 60 years, 100 years. Now, Zionism came about a little later. Of course, I'm not getting into all the details of this. It was ostracized, by the way. The rabbis in Europe issued a fatwa or a decree that we shouldn't go into their synagogues. We have totally divided the Reform synagogues. We divided. Later, so we are totally separate Orthodox, meaning that we keep to the letter of the law, the Sabbath, all the laws of the Torah. That's what Orthodox means. And Reform means that they're going to reform. So they went up.
May I ask you a question though?
Yes.
What are they? So they remove all of these things out of the religion, and what's in place of that?
Yeah.
Because it's like a vacuum, right?
It's just they feel that they know that they're born from Jewish parents and things like that, so they feel they're not anyway. They have to have their own club or something. In other words, that should be able to feel that they're part of a society.
But they are.
They don't. But they made their society. They'll get together to sing, to dance, and to do whatever they want, and they don't feel looked down upon because they're their own group, and they felt that in that way also they'll be accepted by high society wherever they're living.
I see.
But at the end of the day, what happened was there was a famous case called the Captain Dreyfus trials. There was a certain Jewish fellow who was, I believe he wasn't religious at all, and he was a captain in the French army, and basically he was accused of espionage, and what happened was he was going to be sentenced severely, and there was one astute reporter, came along, he said, something smells fishy here. He started delving into the subject, and he started saying, there's something's wrong, and it became a big issue in the French press, and all of a sudden, issue of Jewish, because this guy was Jewish.
What year is this?
I'm embarrassed to say it was by the beginning of Reform, like 250 years.
Oh, so okay, it was a while back.
Yeah, and basically, And so this Captain Dreyfus, it became the whole concept of anti-Semitism swam to the surface because he was a Jewish guy, and this reporter said he's being falsely accused, and it's because he felt it was because of Jews. It turned out he was totally innocent. In court, he was proven innocent, and it was just a higher person in the military who used him as a scapegoat. But a lot of anti-Semitism swam up in the press
because of this case.
In this case, everybody
Right.
started speaking their opinions, and a lot of people started speaking anti-Semitic. So the Dreyfus affair, as it was called, anybody can Google that. Made that a certain group of people, Theodor Herzl, who was the father of Zionism, came along, and we believe it's just the Satan uses excuses. Like I said, just like Reform, they should have just turned away from Judaism. What do you have to? But the Zionists came along and they said, you see, just trying to assimilate and blend into the societies is not doing it for us. So there's another way we can get away with this. We'll make our own nationhood. So they came along and they said, instead of assimilating, we'll buy a piece of land and we'll create our own nation state. They thought of making it in Uganda, in Patagonia, next to Argentina, and they decided they'll pick a lush land, a productive land. Those days was before technology. So this is a movement that started like 140 years ago, 150 years ago.
And where was this?
Also in Austria, Vienna. Theodor Herzl was in Vienna, Austria. And they came along and they said, this assimilation is not working for us. We're going to try another route. Now, so ironically, the Reform, who were not practicing, the leaders were opposed to Zionism because they said, we want to assimilate. You're making us stick out like a sore thumb. So they weren't even happy with it. Today, the vast majority of Reform, or at least a lot of Reform, is part of Zionism because they just picked what's convenient.
Right.
So once they saw it became popular, they decided to jump
on
movement.
the bandwagon, of course.
But Zionism was a distinct different movement than Reform. But Zionism was for the children, grandchildren of the Jews who already estranged themselves from God. They weren't practicing the Torah. Orthodoxy was Jews who remained fast to the Torah. They did not, they won't desecrate the Sabbath. They will only eat kosher and everything. In Europe, it was divided. Orthodox. I'll just mention there's a third branch that's quite famous in America. It's called conservative. Now,
I've heard of that, but I don't understand.
Well, conservative they saw that Reform went so far away from Judaism.
Right.
It was absolutely nothing. It was just hot air. It was nothing.
Right.
So they decided they're going to be a little more conservative. Reform that you're going to change. Conservative, they'll be more conservative than the Reform. But by us, that's all a joke. It means nothing. Judaism is a covenant we made with God. You can't change one letter of the law. In the Torah, it says King Solomon, who God blessed with special wisdom, cannot change even one letter of the law. That's what our rabbis give as an example. So basically, we kept strictly to the law. That's what orthodoxy means, and we've been following this for it's like in the time of beginning of Reform 250 years ago. Orthodox in Europe it was called Orthodox. Orthodox. It's a German word. It follows today, it's orthodoxy. Now, Zionism came along, which their concept was that we should take a piece of land, buy a piece of land. The rabbis from the Orthodox communities said to them, whoa, you can't do that.
It goes against the scripture.
It breaches against the scripture, that we're in exile. I give the example, a father has a son who's very, very naughty, very bad. So he warns him, you're going to be bad, I'm going to punish you. Finally, he says, okay, I'm putting you in the corner. For 10 minutes, you're going to stay in the corner. The kid's fidgety. He stands in the corner for 2 minutes, and he just can't bear it anymore, and he starts running away from the corner. The father said, I'm good already. See, I'm good.
Right.
The father said, look, I want you to remember, that's why I'm putting you for 10 minutes. It should get etched into your heart. You must stand. So the kid who runs away, it's not because he loves because he's doing good for his father. His father's not happy with him leaving the corner.
Correct.
He prescribed this punishment, and the same thing is with Zionism. The Almighty is full of compassion. He knows we're suffering, yet he said we should be in exile. You can't fight God. So
you can try, but you won't win.
Exactly.
That's
so God
for sure.
warns us by King Solomon in the prophecy that he wrote. He said, if you will attempt to rebel against God and leave exile, it will bring catastrophic results. And many rabbis by World War II, when we were being treated, hunted like animals, basically. They said because we had breached the laws of God. I mean, I'll just say, even let's say another, I'm not a prophet, we're not prophets, but we always try to be introspective, understand. The reform movement started in Austria, in Germany. That's where the base of reform was. And they said, we're going to assimilate and everybody's going to love us because of that. We'll drop the religion, we'll assimilate. Where did Hitler come from? Exactly from those places. And he said to the Jews, I'm not interested if you're practicing or not. Your grandparents were Jews, into the gas chambers. So maybe God, and that was the worst. That's where it started. While in Hungary, where my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz, in Hungary, where the most religious, it was to a degree much less affected by Hitler. I mean, not that he didn't come, he eradicated, there was like 750,000 Jews or more, I don't remember that area, and the majority of my family was murdered by the Nazis. But basically, it's maybe just God's hand to show you want to assimilate. That's not the way. You can't run away from God. Now, again, we're not prophets. It's just, if a person studies this, he'll see that assimilation was the majority of German Jews assimilated. They dropped the religion. So look what happened. It didn't help anything. Now Zionism came along, and their concept, as I say, was that not assimilation, but not that they said they're going to practice the religion, mind you. They were estranged. They were mostly non-religious. But they said, we're going to do another thing. We're going to create a state. And the rabbi said, both reform is unacceptable, and your type of concept of creating a nation state is directly a rebellion against the decree of exile that God put the Jews in. Every Jewish person in our prayers says, because of our sins we are in exile. Not because we were physically weak. That's not by us a concept at all. We believe the Almighty rules the world. When one country becomes a superpower, when they rule the world, when they destruct another nation, whatever happens, it's all because it's in God's design. It may seem it happened because this king got angry at that king and everything. Right. Really, behind there's a reason why the Almighty brought. So when there's a tsunami, when there's a plague, when there's an earthquake, a hunger, or when there is an invasion by a country, everything we believe, we right away don't think, oh wow, the problem is what's in front of our eyes, the invasion or the tsunami or the plague. God forbid, of all these things, we say it's. We gather, the rabbis gather the people in the synagogue. That's what's prescribed in our law books, and they say we have to understand, why did the Almighty make this happen?
Right, there's a reason for everything.
There's a reason for everything.
Yeah.
So what we do is and they decree a fast on the community, and then they say we should be introspective and see, why is the Almighty bringing about this terrible
and act accordingly and get the lesson and apply it, and that's the whole point.
Try to better our ways, and then after we do that, if it's a physical thing, like I said, like a decree of a nation of that the Jews have to be thrown out of the land, or that an invasion of another. So then our rabbis will get together, a few rabbis, and they'll try to placate and to appease the invading the king or whoever it is who decreed against the Jews a terrible decree, God forbid. So they'll approach them, maybe you should please drop the decree.
Right, petition.
Right, but the first issue is we realize it's from God. There's nothing that's ever. So our concept of exile has absolutely no question. It's not because we were physically weak. It's purely because of our sins. And the solution is you can't shoot yourself out of this decree of God. The solution is, one, to repent, to be better our ways, and then ultimately God, with his compassion, we don't question God's compassion. He will end exile. This is the one of Judaism. Zionism scorns the religious Jews. Zionism, I carry this picture along. This is the picture of Theodor Herzl on the wall here. And there you see Ben Gurion, the first prime minister, and you see they're sitting at the dais at this most historical moment. It's the David Ben Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence in 1948 in Independence Hall. So what do you see here? You see that all the ones at the dais, They don't even have beards. But forget about it, they're not covering the head. A Jewish male is required to cover the head all the time to show we believe there's a God above us.
So was this an anti-religious movement? In other words,
So
it's
Zionism
more political.
Zionism hated the religion. They tried to transform Judaism from subservience to God, from the acceptance of the laws of God, the covenant of God, into a new nationalism. It's a base material concept of nationalism. We should have a land, and we should have a strong army. We should not be a second-rate country. We should have an Olympic team, Nobel Prize winners, an army, a strong army, and we shouldn't be ashamed of any other nation.
Right.
They're always trying to be. So that is what Zionism is. Zionism is a transformation from spirituality, from subservience to God, to totally removing God from the equation. It is a nationalist physical concept. They are striving for a national home. And they're ready to
and they'll
sacrifice.
stop at nothing to get it.
Right.
The way it seems.
They'll sacrifice anything on the altar of Zion because they don't have God's morals. So anything that stands in their way gets sacrificed for this. The rabbis, we put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out. It's 130 years. It's over 15 years already. It's 130 years of religious Jewish opposition to Zionism. This is a compilation of the major rabbis from every country, from Hungary, from Jerusalem, from
I think for most, excuse me, Rabbi, I think for most Americans, like Christian Americans, there's so much confusion, right? Most Christians, and I'm talking about like generally, right? Most Christians are people who they're good people.
Right.
They can't conceive of anyone using religion to manipulate them to support things that are clearly just atrocious, right? I'm like at odds. And one part of me, I say, how can you support this? Because I'm a Catholic. But when I see Christian, like Catholics don't have like a dog in this game, I don't think. We're not either which way. But I see a lot of American Christians, evangelicals mostly, push this agenda, Zion. And I say, like, part of me gets frustrated, but the other part of me realizes like the human condition, right? Most people are very much afraid, or they're good inside, or they're trying to do the good thing and they get confused. And these leaders, it's just, to me, it is perverse to use God to manipulate good people, simple people, to do these atrocious things, to take their money, to get their vote, and I think that for a lot of Christians, and I have on my channel, have had a lot of people comment on my videos and say, no, that's not what it says. And, we have to support. And I tried so much to explain to them, could you please, Rabbi, address specifically the American Christian Zionists and help them understand why what they're supporting isn't actually of God.
Yeah, so with God's help, with the Almighty's help, we have to understand a person is on this world, we believe, to be tested. The Almighty wants us to sanctify His name, but if everybody would just be in the mindset to do everything righteous, then God has angels for that. He put a person with tests on this world, good and bad, and the person chooses and goes on a path, and then when he returns his soul to the Almighty, the Almighty. So what did he do with his life?
Correct.
So there's always tests. And a test means that we believe that Satan will be punished. We say at the end of time in our Talmud, it says, why will he be punished? Because he colors things. He tries to confuse a person, make him think. Nobody goes out there and says, most people don't go out there and say, I enjoy torturing people, I enjoy killing people. In order to get to that, the Almighty puts into their minds that they're doing a very good deed by imposing their will on another person, and taking that person and trying to dehumanize this person, and in order to get into a mood or a mindset that they should feel they're doing good by destroying that other people. Right.
That is righteous.
So that's what we believe. So you have to understand that that's by every generation, by everything here. So we have Zionism. When Zionism comes along, I mean, if anybody would have been in Europe before the creation of the state, and they would have gone to every community, like I say, whether it's Hungary, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, I mean, we have all the leaders of all these communities. Like here, this is a very famous rabbi, his name Rabbi Yisroel Meir Cohen, author of Chavetz Chaim. He lived from 1839 to 1933. So he passed away 15 years before the creation of the state of Israel, which was in 1948. But Zionism was already booming. So he's stated, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. I'll just give you an example. Now, I picked that he's a famous person because he was a codifier of Jewish law that is respected in all the Jewish communities as a codifier of Jewish law. If I'll go to another part of the world, the Sephardic part of the world, that means from Middle Eastern countries, in Spain, there's like those Jews have a different customs than us, the same laws, but the same. So one of their very famous leaders that everybody again recognizes, his name was Rabbi Yisroel Abu Chatzira. He's from Morocco. He was called Baba Sali. Now, he lived from 1890 to 1984. So he lived into already after the creation of the state of Israel. He lived quite long, from 1890. And he stated, and I'm quoting him, he said, I hereby join the great rabbis of the Sephardic Eid Haredis. The Sephardic, as I say, means the Middle Eastern countries, and he said of the Eid Haredis, God-fearing community in the holy city of Jerusalem, in support of the Torah ruling that it is forbidden to participate in the governmental elections because it is against our holy Torah. Basically, everybody said Zionism wrong. So at the beginning of Zionism, if somebody, Christian who accepts the Bible and they're God-fearing and they say, oh wow, the Bible, it's we respect it and everything, and they would go to the rabbis, leaders, they would have seen that the Zionists were ostracized from the communities. The Zionists were clearly defying the laws in their daily lives. Right. As a whole, they were non-religious. Theodor Herzl was totally non-religious, and Ben Gurion and Golda Meir, and all
somehow the American mind, the public.
Let me explain that.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, if you will just ask the Jewish communities that are practicing and living the Torah, so you'll see they're against it. So why? So because as I explained, you will see the distinct difference between what it means to be Jewish, the covenant that the Jews have, to be subservient to God, to uphold the Torah, what it means, this covenant, what it means, the children of Israel that we are following, the children of Israel for over 3,000 years and 2,000 years in the European continent and so forth. It simply means to follow the covenant. The Zionism is just, imagine, you'll say somebody's going to make a Buddhist concept and call it Buddhist Judaism. So you'll say that doesn't make sense.
Right.
So that's what Zionism. They just like Reform, they decided to make a rabbinate and ordain their ministers, even though it's crazy. And the same thing, Zionism came along. They made a rabbinate, and they have their chief rabbis who everybody, when you go ask who's the chief rabbi, you Google chief rabbi, so they'll show you the chief rabbis of Israel, the ones who are what? Who are the heads of a state of Israel that they convene in the Knesset, they call it,
right?
And where they make a decision if you have to keep the 10 Commandments. If you Tel Aviv, the cars are going and coming in the Sabbath like it would be a Monday, and no difference. And they make decisions which laws of God should be accepted, and which
you can throw away.
Yeah, and they have a chief rabbi for this. They have their rabbinate and their rabbis. It's an insult to the whole concept of Judaism. It's more than an insult. It's a rebellion. But this is so they made a rabbinate and the chief rabbis, and they dressed them with this attire that makes them look holy. But we have a rabbinate, the Eid Haredis, who I just mentioned, Abu Chatzirus, and the rabbi in 1947, a year before they made the state, the United Nations sent a delegation to the Holy Land to see what to do about making a state or not. And the chief rabbi in our communities was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory. And he's sitting, you can see a picture, with the delegation of the United Nations. And he stated to them in 1947, July 16th, 1947, the United Nations documents, it's there. He said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. He was living there. He was the head of this large community, these tens and hundreds of thousands of Jews. He said, we don't want this state. He's the anti-Semitic. No, he's the head of the people.
Yeah, this
But-
is
and he
why.
said- so why? Because again, when you look in the Bible, God blesses in Genesis and he blesses Abraham.
Abraham.
He says, and you should be blessed and your blessings. All these verses, it doesn't mean because if somebody's going to come along and say, oh, I'm going to go to the United Nations and I'm going to buy myself a stamp and a license to call my nation the children of Israel.
Right.
So the people of the Christian world are going to say, what do you mean you're going to buy it? You're going to buy it. Is it is it a Jewish state? Is it not? But they don't question.
They
with
don't
Zionists. They don't question it. But think about it. All the rabbis that were living there, the community that were living there for hundreds and hundreds of years, who was living, by the way, there? As I said, we're not allowed to go up in mass, but there was throughout the ages. People knew it's a holy land. It never lost its holiness.
Correct.
So every people from Russia, from Ukraine, from Hungary, the rabbi would retire. A few of them, not many, and they would say, I want to live off the rest of my years in holiness. They would take a few of their picked students, and they would go up to the Holy Land. So it became the Ivy League of Judaism in Jerusalem and in Palestine, in Safed, Tiberia, Tiberias, Meron, and Jerusalem, Al-Quds, so the Jews, the people that were living there were this elite community of God-fearing Jews. 2-3 hours before sundown Friday, because that's when the Sabbath starts by the Jewish people. The day starts from the night and then the day. That's how it's reckoned, the day, the night and then day. So before sundown Friday, when we're not allowed to do any work anymore, they would blow a horn in the Jewish quarters, and the rabbis would go around and see, like 2 hours before the Sabbath, they would knock at every store would close. It would be dead silence. There would be no stores open. That was the way the society of Jerusalem and the whole of Palestine, nobody dared desecrate the Sabbath. Zionism comes along,
And they don't care.
and they made it a nationhood, and they're proud to announce we're a democracy. They say they're a democracy. Keep Sabbath, don't keep Sabbath. It's free.
Whatever.
Do what you want.
Yeah, do whatever you
That's
want.
a Jewish state. It's hypocritical. It's false. And so what they're just simply doing is. So they're using this concept of Judaism as a facade. They're using it to intimidate, that if anybody dares to speak up against them,
Then you're anti-Semitic.
then you're anti-Semitic.
You're against
That way-
Jewish people. You're a bigot.
Yeah.
We can do whatever we want. And
Exactly.
so
And
just
that's
to
very
clarify,
successful.
Rabbi, because
Yes.
I know I'm going to get asked.
Okay.
To clarify,
Yes.
for American evangelical Zionists that are listening to this,
Yes.
to put it to rest,
Yes.
the covenant is not unconditional, correct?
The covenant is unconditional, right?
But the land,
Yeah.
right now, the Jewish people are in exile.
Yes. The
And then
covenant is
the Judaism
right.
does not support a Zionist nation
It
or
totally
anything
opposes it.
that Israel is doing in the
Opposes-
area.
Right.
Okay.
We have a covenant that we're not allowed to change, and the covenant is to be subservient to God and to emulate God.
And that's it.
And that's all it is, and it will never change. We're not allowed to change one iota of it. So even though Zionism comes along under the mantle now of orthodoxy, the settlers, what they call modern orthodoxy, it's a euphemism for changing, for a compromised orthodoxy. That's what the settlers are and all that. So they'll have Smotrich and Ben Gvir, these guys who claim they're Orthodox, but it's just another form of reform. Of
Yeah, it's
change.
a reform,
So
yeah.
you go invariably around the world, come to New York, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, with the religious community, the very religious will never accept not only the atrocities, the genocide, which we're crying and hurting with the people of Palestine. We just can't look at this anymore. But even the mere existence of the occupation, even if it would have been uninhabited, the land, we would still oppose it because we're not allowed to make a Jewish homeland, and certainly not by killing and stealing, and certainly not to a people who embraced the Jews when we were suffering and took us in. And people should just know
Yes.
the hundreds of thousands of Jews in Palestine, around the world, who demonstrate, who never report in the papers because
No, the media doesn't tell you any
and
of
they don't
this.
show you that Jews get arrested because they refuse
Yeah,
to serve
there's
the army.
never
They get brutally beaten,
Yeah,
children. all
the media is very silent on this, and I think that's part of like the American Christian Zionists. Like
They're afraid to
they're
speak up.
afraid they're afraid to do something wrong. They're afraid
Right.
to speak up. Their leaders don't let them, and they mean well.
Well,
But it's also there's a huge guilt of like I don't believe in this, and so I'm just thank you,
Yeah.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Listen, this has been so eye-opening for me. I know a lot of people are going to watch this and they're really going to start to free themselves and start to think for themselves and understanding the difference.
There's Jews in Palestine, in the city of Al-Quds, Jerusalem. They're brutally being beaten. That, if not, there would be hundreds of thousands on the streets. They stand up and demonstrate constantly for 77 years of the state. And you can see children, and it would be the greatest scandal if it would happen in New York, or God forbid it should happen anywhere else. But over there, because they have their rabbis and they consider it a Jewish state, everybody ignores what they're doing. And people are also afraid they shouldn't be called anti-Semitic, because they're making the IHR laws here now that they're equating. That's the
IHRA.
That's their ploy, that they're equating and conflating Judaism with Zionism. So if you speak up anything that do that, you're anti-God, you're anti-Semitic. That is anti-Semitic in and of itself, because the people hate a Jew, God forbid, because they look as if we're responsible, the more religious, as if we're more responsible for the actions of Zionism, while in truth, we're the most opposed to Zionism. So they're hurting the religious Jew, they're hurting the Jews, and they're making a hate between Jews and Muslims, and blood of Arabs and Muslims and Jews are being poured for a pure, selfish, flawed, nationalist ambition. And it's totally unacceptable. We want, with God's help, and we pray to God, we urge everybody to pray for a speedy and peaceful dismantlement of the state, just like you got rid of apartheid, a removal of the impediment to peace, so we can live together as we've had in this beautiful fabric the whole year, and around the world, Jews and Muslims, Christians, we lived always together. So this is what has to be removed. And we wish the world should spread this word and let the people in Palestine know that we're hurting with them, we're crying with them. God will help. God has all the power to do. He can. We hope he will do it right away. But till that day comes, do not be intimidated. Speak up as much as you could. I know you will be accused of self-hating Jews and that, but try what you can. Urge your politicians that they should do what they can to stop this murder in Gaza, to stop the oppression of the Palestinians, and it will be a gift for the Jewish people also.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. That was perfectly said. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know about you guys, but we were floored by everything that we learned that day. I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to speak with Rabbi Weiss, and I encourage you guys to research his claims for yourself so that you can see how we've been manipulated to fund Israel and its atrocities for decades. Like I said, enough is enough, and America first is up to us. So what do you guys think? Did you learn anything new? Leave your feedback below. I'd love to read it. I had a blast doing this interview, and if you'd like to see me do more, please click the link below to support the channel. See you on the next vid.